I got tired of walking around with a mask on, smiling but my heart singing sad songs. Yeah, I was living for myself, I was dead wrong till I got the call, no cell phone. Man, you talking to the real me.
Cath, the legend, is in the house. Thank you for coming on board. I just wanted to start for the viewers to give them an understanding of what the podcast is about, really, because we're still in the infancy of it. You know, the Uncompromised Podcast is an opportunity for basically me to pick experts' brains. It's for my own self-interest, really, rather than the viewers. But I know a lot of the audience that I work with will value a lot of the stuff that, you know, I value as well. So one of the things that I really wanted to get with the guests on the podcast is people who have gone, rags to riches is probably the wrong term, but who have gone through some kind of transition in their life, whether it's business, health, on personal, spiritual level, from a position where they were compromising themselves to now where they are in their relative success. And I think from knowing you for years now, I think we've probably known each other nearly 5 years, something like that.
I reckon.
Knowing from where you've come from with your own business, from how you were showing up as a copywriter, as a marketer, and transitioning into that new purpose of kind copy and the whole ethos behind what kind copy is, and redefining and tuning into that alignment of building a business that is in alignment with your core values. So do you want to kind of just give the team a bit of a background on kind of what that transition was like?
Mate, honestly, as soon as you say transition and transformative experiences, I feel like my entire life has been like a refinement of process from the start, right? So every time I've had any kind of work whatsoever, there's always been a period of, well, these are some things I liked about it, but these are some things I didn't like about it. And every time I've used that to make a new, better decision, but it's never been necessarily the right decision until now, I feel. So my background is as a psychologist. I was a teacher for a long time. I spent 12 years working in education, and I got made redundant twice. And I just thought it's just frankly bollocks that somebody else can take your career away with one decision. The first time, I was so wounded by it. I thought it was such a personal criticism. I really struggled with it. Then I got made redundant the second time, and I was like, good. I'm going to take more from this challenge than it takes from me. So I left and I became self-employed. I was self-employed as a personal trainer, fully booked, gym floor, Ramo, great client base, incredible community, just had a massive laugh with like the best team of clients. Then COVID hit. And it was right in between that I started working on copy, and I really did it for myself. It started when my dad died, and I went back to work the next day. And I was like, I'm just not going to deal with any of this. I'm just not going to think about it. It's all massive. It's really hard to deal with. And instead of processing any of that, I'm just going to work. I'm going to work and I'm going to train, and I'm going to ignore it. Until maybe 3 months later, when I got flu, and I was so ill, it put me to bed for 2 weeks, and I spent the entire 2 weeks lying in bed thinking, shit, how am I going to earn money? And I was lying there scared about money, grieving, ill, and I thought, I've got to find a better skill set here, something that can be leveraged more intelligently, because I love being on the gym floor and I love my clients, but this is making me feel so vulnerable. So I started to learn to write just for my own business. I just intended to take my business online as well. And when gyms closed, I was like, thank God I've got this extra skill set, because I spent maybe a year kind of like dabbling. I actually kept it secret for a whole year. Didn't tell anybody that I was doing this. Just wanted to get my reps in private. And then when gyms did close, I felt, okay, I can go all on in this. I've got an opportunity to develop this skill set more aggressively. And that's kind of the context of setting up as a marketer, really.
That's amazing. And I do remember now, in previous conversations, we talked about the feelings that were attached with grieving and wanting to just create something really positive for yourself in terms of like how you show up day to day. Because I think something that I notice a lot with my clients as well is my own journey, going through certain limiting beliefs, overcoming certain parts of me that, you know, I wasn't proud of. And my own journey is that we often, what's the word? The term that I usually use with my clients is like productivity is like often fear masqueraded as practicality, and it's like we distract ourselves with these things to really avoid the underlying issues that we're avoiding, and a lot of that comes from not being ready at that stage in your life, but also just wanting to avoid that discomfort of actually having to go through that growth and that change. And I think for a lot, because I only work with business owners, guys in really high-powered, stressful jobs, it's like tying and bringing that awareness and consciousness to the fact that that's probably what's going on for a lot of them, and what is the driving forces of why they want to be successful, and building something that, or pursuing something that is authentic to your core values and what you wanted to do. And it's when I see so many men coming to me and saying, they haven't got confidence, a lot of the time it has nothing to do with the physical side of things. It's about, like you said, that lying in bed and going, I want to be able to actually make something that I find passion in, something that nobody can take away from me. And a lot of the time, like, the confidence that the men are lacking is because they're not actually sure of who they are on a deeper level, fundamentally the core values of what they stand for, what they believe in. And they don't know how to articulate and communicate that, to really communicate their values so that other people can see it as well. And when you can't communicate and set boundaries and standards with yourself for the values you believe in, that chips away at your confidence. So one of the main things I wanted to understand from you today, and something you've helped me so much with in the past with my own copy and my own ability to communicate, is like bringing more awareness around what is the hidden cost of weak messaging for men, whether it's in business, whether it's in their own personal standards, and maybe some of the trends that you see within men. I think would be a really amazing thing to get a deeper insight on.
1,000,000%. Now, if you think about the way we talk to ourselves on a daily basis, this is basically a sales letter or an ad or any form of marketing that we write to ourselves every day. And some of us are writing some terrible copy. Some of us are writing some really harsh messaging, unproductive, unsupportive, judgmental. If you think about it from a training perspective, if you say to yourself, I don't have time to train properly, that's just shitty copywriting. You're focused on the obstacle rather than the benefit of the thing you want to do. No writer would ever write a headline that starts, well, I probably don't have time for this. You'd never do that to yourself. But we do that all the time when it comes to the way we talk to ourselves and the way we think about ourselves. When it comes to high performance, it's not just about having better habits. You'll know, like, anybody who has explored the world of self-development will know this. The more you can stack habits, the more you can combine things that are already strong for you with things that you're trying to do. That's a familiar idea. But all that's doing is positioning your goal like a hook. Impossible to ignore. So you are already every day marketing to yourself, describing the position you want to hold with yourself, the credibility you want to possess with your own reputation. And when you have weak messaging through wishy-washy language, or I'm going to try to eat better, or I'm going to try to make this change, that's a weak message because you're not all in on the decision you're making. The whole message to yourself is conditional, temporary. Imagine if you said, I'm definitely going to have a really good go at this, provided it's just do it, provided it's not too hard and nothing else crops up and I feel all right on the morning. You'd never do that. You wouldn't do that in business. We wouldn't do that in business. So, we place these unnecessary constraints on ourselves when it comes to fitness because we think that it's a lesser value. It has less value than work, money, family, travel, whatever else it is. And actually, these are all dimensions of the same value. Your relationship with yourself.
Yeah. And it's like the perceived value of the thing as well, or they haven't created or spent the time to attach the value into the long-term goal. It's like, I think something you taught me was like the rule of three. It's like, it's not what's the goal, it's what's the goal beneath the goal beneath the goal. It's a lot of guys come to me and say, Andy, I want to get in shape. I want to have six-pack abs. For some, I'm like, cool, that's a valid goal, but what's the real goal behind that? Okay, you want to be more confident. Why do you want to be more confident? Go another layer deeper is because you want to meet a partner and you want to feel loved. And but most men aren't ready to have that kind of conversation or show that level of vulnerability, even though it's the thing that keeps them up at night. And I think the more aware, I mean, it's got better these days with social media, and, you know, you have people like what's her name on Instagram that I follow? The psychotherapist lady, I can't remember what her tag is, but she does these like conversational style reels where it's like, it really gets you to connect with the limiting belief without directly making you feel like you're being attacked or called out. And I think the more stuff like that is happening for men, they are raising their emotional intelligence, they are understanding themselves better, and they are able to tune into, you know, what they're actually feeling and their core drivers. Because like you said, if you're not actually connecting into them, you're always going to kind of be stumbling on the same pitfalls when it comes to your health and fitness. It's something that I've gone through on a huge level over these last kind of 18 months with myself and my own personal journey and doing like coaching therapy stuff, is developing something what I call a warrior's code, which is, it's almost like a mission statement for yourself, or like, if you want to call them the 10 commandments, for just things that you truly value, and you kind of see the world through those lenses when on a day-to-day basis. And I think a lot of men are operating from a position where they don't have a kind of warrior code for themselves or a set of values that they are operating by, which is why they're often found themselves being pulled from pillar to post between fad diets, between different styles of workouts, and not actually committing to something because they don't actually know what they value. So they're not seeking out opportunities and a strategy that's unique to them on their own journey, because they don't or haven't spent the time to actually tune into themselves on an emotional level and their core values. And I think one of the biggest things that I learned from you was just being able to create that level of self-awareness through my own journey and talking about my own stories in my content that creates that resonation with people. And I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think it's massively overlooked for men when they're trying to pursue any kind of goal, is like, okay, understanding the core drivers behind that goal. And I think that's something that can impact health, it can impact business. And from a psychological level, how was it transitioning for you into kind of like copywriting, of finding like your groove with the kind copy style of things and not going, like you say, twisting the knife and going too deep when you're writing content?
On one hand, I think people hear the name kind copy and they think this is about being soft.
No,
this is about
different.
being nice, right? Nice all the time. And it's really, really not. Kind copy is not about being a bunch of soft cocks. It really isn't that. This is really more about strategic, tactical deployment of emotional engagement. When you twist the knife, particularly in a coaching context, but in any business marketing where you need the person you're selling to be actively involved in their own rescue. So it's not just, I'm selling you some supplements and all you've got to do is take them. If they're actively involved in this process, it doesn't make any strategic sense to be cruel to them in the beginning. Because when you do that, and this includes yourself, by the way, when you do that, you push their nervous system into a point of being so overstimulated, they're so anxious and aroused and
Triggered the emotional response.
Triggered, that they can't actually take any action in a meaningful way. So when you use pain-based marketing, where you twist the knife and you make it much bigger and worse and magnify it, that person is stuck in a position where all I can do now is turn to someone else to rescue me. And people think when they do their own marketing, that's great, then I become the rescuer. Yeah, but then you become the rescuer. And your business is full of people who need rescuing, and you don't actually like to coach people like that because they aren't able to take action. And that's not their fault, because you've made them believe that they're helpless by talking about pain all of the time in your marketing. So obviously there's got to be pain, otherwise there's no problem to solve. But this is true when you look at yourself as well, and when you manage your own behaviour. All you need to do is to hold up a mirror, not a magnifier. This has got to be a true representation of what the problem actually is. Not much worse. Not, oh my God, when I'm 80 and I'm on my deathbed, I'm not going to be able to... None of that. It's literally just, what are you experiencing today that you don't want to experience tomorrow? That's it. You don't have to go further than that. That's a respectful way of marketing. I think, like, people talk about ethical marketing. I think it's about decency. I think it's about making the problem... treating the problem as this is an accurate representation of what the problem is, and you have all of the skills and power you need to actually solve this problem yourself. You're not helpless. You're not stupid. You can find a way to work towards the solution, and then the conversation becomes much more collaborative. And you can do this with yourself as well. This isn't just a marketing situation. This is anytime you've realised there's a problem in your life, let's get clear on what the problem actually is, and let's make a plan of attack. Because everybody listening to this is going to be a very proactive person. You're going to live your life in a solution state. So when there are problems, if you can't attack them with 100% intensity, you probably think, I'll just ignore that for now, because I'm not ready to go all in on solving it. But actually, you can probably solve a little bit of it. What can I solve today? What's the smallest part of this problem that I can make a little bit better to create a little bit of space so I can think tactically about what I need next? And often that's all it takes to put yourself in a solution state.
Yeah, no, I really resonated with what you were saying, because inside my program, we look at the guys through three lenses, which is them as the person, their emotional, mental health, their emotional stability, the physique side of things, which is what predominantly 99% of guys come for, but it's not what they get, and the profession and how that integrates. And a lot of the time, like, I'm going to them, right, looking at you through those three lenses, like being honest with ourselves, like, you're here for that physical goal, no doubt, we're going to improve your health, that's the easy bit. What are the things in the personal and professional level that are ultimately holding you back right now? Because then it's almost like using inversion thinking with them and going, right, if your end goal is to not lose all of your business, your job, your career, what are the things you know that you need to do so that that doesn't happen? Okay, right, well, I need to be on time, I need to I need to, have this routine and structure. Okay, like, right, so you're already really good at those things. Let's now apply that to the areas that you're struggling with. And then suddenly it's like that light bulb moment comes, and it becomes a lot less daunting and overwhelming to have to focus on those things, as opposed to trying to completely overhaul the life at the same time. And I think that's something, when I go back to my own content and I think about trying to help people with value-based content in my own coaching business, is how I wanted to show up. And I found myself years ago kind of talking about pain points and my struggles and things, but there wasn't actually any value in terms of bridging the gap. And it's like, now the way that I communicate with my audience and the way that I speak to my guys, it's all like action driven. And I think it needs to be, because one of the things I see holding most men back when it comes to getting in shape or overcoming limiting beliefs or just having the confidence and the structure to pursue and become better in their career is it all has to be almost like lowest hanging fruit, entry level action step stuff, because otherwise they just get distracted. And I think it's linked to, like, these days people have such short attention spans to focus on a goal for longer than 5 minutes, whether that's due to social media or just like the attention span of things has dipped so much that if you create too many things and like goals for them to focus on at one time, it just becomes like this net of self-fulfilling prophecy of overwhelm, and that they already believe they can't do it, so they use that as an excuse to fall back on. And I think whenever I read your content, I'm always like, when I finish it, I'm like, makes you feel better about yourself, but it also is very like clear on what the action steps need to be. And I think for men, something that I wanted to kind of pick your brains about is like, what do you feel men respond to, like, especially with my niche, because you've helped me with my content. What do you find men respond to the best in terms of language, in terms of directness, in terms of just the general style of copy that works well for getting men to take action?
I think everybody in a high emotion state, so that's your audience for men, but it's also lots of women, anybody who is in a solution state responds well to, here's the next thing you need to do. So a demonstration that you understand the problem,
Yep.
some sort of demonstration that you've worked with people on this same problem before, ideally people who were starting from an even lower point than they are, because that shows that you can solve an even bigger problem, not a million miles away, just a little bit worse, right? And then give them something that actually works. And the call to action, you'll know the first probably, maybe everything on my social media is geared towards this, is give this a go, let me know what you think. So it's a proof of concept all of the time. I had a client who was in the same position as you, except a little bit worse. Here's what we did. The first step for you now is this. Go and do it. And people buy into that when they're in a solution state because they are proactively trying to solve their problem. So when you give them the first little thing that they need to do and it works and they do it, the fast track of trust is massive because it establishes you as an authority, but it also empowers them to be actively involved in their own rescue. And I think a mistake that lots of coaches make, and I don't see you but I know that lots of coaches do make this mistake, is DM me for the solution, or like I do know what it is, honest. Like let's talk about it on a sales call. I'm like, well, just give them the thing that works. If you lack authority, just tell them. There's like, if you have really solved this problem 100 times, 1,000 times, give them the first step then. Show them how well you understand this problem. And your audience listening to this, if you're a carpenter and you have an apprentice come to work in your carpentry shop, what's the first thing they need to do? If you've actually been a carpenter for 1,000 days, you know the first thing that needs to happen on any given day. That's all we're giving them. That's all social media is. It's a digital version of that. So, yeah, find the future-facing, not backwards-facing. What is the next meaningful action you can take by yourself? Go and take it and report back to me. 99% of people will never do that, because they just want to wallow in the shit. They just want to enjoy the pain, and they're not ready yet to actually take the actions, because actions are hard. But give them something that really works, and tell them, this really works, go and do it, and you'll see. Then come back and get step 2. The likelihood of them buying at that point is massively higher, because they know they can do it, they know you can do it, and they know your system works. So that's the gap, is that they don't know if they can manage it, if you're full of shit maybe, which you, like most people probably are, or that is this system really qualitatively different from anything I've done before? And when they see that it is, they're like, I'm fully in. Because they were already in a solution state, and most people won't do that. They'll just fob them off with like, drink more water, go for a walk. I'm like, oh yeah, nice, okay, good. I've heard this 1,000 times before.
No, it all makes sense. I think from what you said about your words we use, the wallowing in the shit, is like, I really relate to that, because, and this isn't me talking down on any kind of client, I've been doing this for 13 years and I've had periods in my business where I take responsibility of attracting guys who ultimately weren't ready or already at that stage in their life to commit to change. And you can excuse that as saying, okay, maybe you just weren't a good enough coach, but there is an element of, you can only lead a horse to water. And one thing that I noticed at that stage in my life, it was when I was going through the most, if you want to call it like overhauling trauma stuff in my life through coaching. And that energy that I was putting out there in my content was obviously attracting people who were still probably in those open wound states, which is fine because you learn from it, right? But one thing I noticed was, in that phase of working with those guys, is the tonality and language that guys who didn't believe in themselves were using. So it's like when you were saying wallowing in the shit, I'm like, yeah, because a lot of those guys that I was working with at that time in their life, and some of them did make amazing changes and stick with it and get the result, but it took a lot longer than my normal kind of client journey process, was that it's like they said about that self-fulfilling prophecy. When it comes to psychology, sometimes that's like cliche niche saying is like, sometimes you choose the hard that you're familiar with as opposed to the hard that's going to make the change. And it's that's that wallowing concept of people who are in pain would rather stay in pain because it's familiar than actually committing to reaching out. And this is something that I see with men all the time. and why I make it so easy for them to actually, like, the lowest hanging fruit for them to raise the hand is because when it comes to like those driving belief systems, men are driven, I mean, everyone's driven by status to an extent of some form of status, but like they don't want to be seen reaching out for help or showing that vulnerability. And so when I'm speaking to guys, or say like I get a guy on a coaching call looking to join, he's like, Andy, I've been fucking watching your content for so long, like, and liking it. And I'm like, yeah, you never fucking like it though, do you? Mm. Because they don't want to be seen in public showing that vulnerability. And I think one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, from writing for probably thousands of bits of content, probably more, hundreds of thousands, millions of bits of content, is what's the difference in tonality and language that this is going to be a kind of a polarizing topic of high value men and low value men. I think the term the kids these days are using is alpha and beta men, or it's very like it's very Tate-esque. But I think what's the kind of differences in language you notice from like genuine, assertive, confident alphas, if you want to consider that, and what language to kind of beta men who aren't having that quite confidence and self-belief yet? What's the biggest differences that you see in the language used?
When people are lacking confidence and they are in a low emotional state, mm-hmm. the sorts of questions they ask are things like, how are you going to get me this result? People who are in a high emotional state is, what are we going to do, or what am I going to do as my first step? So people who are in a low emotional state want to outsource responsibility. I had somebody ask me this recently. Will your copy make me money? Immediate red flag, right? Immediate red flag. I'm like, I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with you. I don't need your money badly enough for this, because I know, just from that one question, I know you're going to be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
I know it's going to be a nightmare.
One max effort, minimum input from them type thing. Yeah.
The other thing that low emotion people do is they look backwards. So they tend to say things like, when I've worked with a PT, or when I've done things in the past, or they want to look backwards as a means of justification for what the situation they're in now. They're not looking backwards to understand. They're looking backwards to excuse
and verify.
Right, yeah. And it's quite a subtle difference, but because they're both backwards facing. But it's rather than, I can see now, when I was working with a coach before, I would skip check-ins, and that was a problem. So this time I want you to be really on me when it comes to check-ins, right? I've learned a lesson. That's a positive statement. Whereas it was when I've worked with coaches in the past, like nothing worked for me, and this it's an excuse. Versus a person in a high emotional state, who will look forward and they'll say, okay, so in the next 30 days, this is the sort of thing. Like, what sort of results can I expect in the next 7 days, in the next 30 days, in the next 90 days? And they'll think in terms of forward-facing goals rather than backwards-facing goals. So those are the two things that I think are probably the major things. The language they use is excusatory versus personal responsibility, and they will look backwards versus looking forwards. I think those are probably the two main ones. But it's... they'll do that to me. I had a man ask me this recently. How fast can you make me money? I was like, bro, you make the money. I write the words. Can you close? Can you close people? Like, I've got no responsibility over your team. Can your team close? So yeah, that was like red flag number one. Red flag central. I was like, nice. Thank you for declaring yourself early doors, because I am out. But yeah, so that was... those are the two sort of probably major ones for me in terms of an emotional state. Trying to think if there's anything else.
Well, I'll give you some context, because the reason I asked that is it wasn't like a trick question for you. It was more for the viewers to be able to listen if they are thinking, not trying to identify am I an alpha or beta, because it's not black and white. Everyone has core values of what determines self-worth and success. But the reason I asked you it is because I wanted the viewers to be able to get more self-awareness for themselves. It's like you said, are they using excusatory, is that a word? We'll pretend it is a word, excusatory language, or language that excuses their shortfalls, pitfalls of not being where they want to be, because I think half of what I do as a coach is it's like bringing awareness to the real problem. You know, like I say, clients will come to me and say, Andy, the problem is I'm busy. The problem is, you know, I've not got the time to do this. And I'm like, well, it's probably not a busyness issue. It's probably a structure and a time management issue or an energy management issue. You know, like you said, the layer of three, like going beneath the problem, beneath the problem, beneath the problem. And I think the more awareness and frameworks you can give to guys who are looking to make the change but feel stuck is, okay, look inwards. Like, what are you thinking about on a day-to-day basis? What are you exposing yourself to in your environments that is ultimately shaping that belief system? And also bring more awareness around your own language, around how are you talking about yourself? How are you communicating your needs to other people? And I think, so again, this is a kind of like a follow-on question for you, is how do high-value men communicate better to get what they want? From what you've experienced in terms of psychology, in terms of copy that sells, what are the things that men can do to become more high-value in their communication?
That's a phenomenal question, and it's absolutely enormous. I mean, when it comes to speaking to your own values, I think that is the problem in itself, right? I think the main problem that men face, high-value men face, is that it's hard to communicate your values when you don't know what they are. And most people don't talk like this. Most people spend precisely none of their time considering what their actual values are. And then when you don't consider what your values are, the default is that you have...
Your values are filled by other people's who
you absorb them, right? Like, they're not even, like, you haven't even chosen them. You haven't acquired them. They've just sort of osmosised themselves into you. And because you haven't actively chosen them and you're not consciously aware of them, it's very hard then to live a life which is in accordance with them, because sometimes you feel like you've got two contradictory values running at the same time. So without space to really consider what those values are...
Oh, one sec, Cath. I just realised I've not plugged my laptop in and it's going to go low battery. MX, can we get a quick laptop save? Oh, I think it's gone. No, we're still here. There we go, the buzz that we all needed. Okay, we're back. Thank you, mate.
Run thing.
Sorry about that.
Sorry, mate. When it comes to the values, if you don't really know what they are consciously, and if you haven't made a decision to choose them yourself or examine them yourself, based on your own personal experiences and your own reflective practice, you are almost certainly running software that has been given to you by somebody else. And that might suit you just fine. Maybe those really are your values. Perhaps there is an alignment on those things. But for lots of them, they're probably not. Like, a really good example of this, which is such a strange and personal example, right? When I first moved out from my parents' house and went to live with my now husband, we lived together in sin for several years, right? My parents hated this. They were like, you're living in sin. I was like, can you give me any argument other than a religious argument for why I shouldn't do that? And we sort of butted heads. I guess I was like in my mid-20s, right? We butted heads around this. And they were like, no, it is literally just living in sin. I was like, that is literally a retarded argument. Like, have you got anything else that you want to bring to this argument? My parents both legally trained, so we would mentally spar like that. Is there anything else you'd like me to consider? No. I was like, then I reject this argument. This is not a good enough argument. Now, if you'd hit me with, your partner has got considerable debt, and when you live together, you will absorb that debt, and you've got no debt. Have you considered that? That would have been a much better argument. Because my value is financial safety, not religious beliefs that I don't hold. So if you don't take the time to consider your own beliefs at any point, which most people don't, it's very easy to get stuck on running somebody else's values, particularly when they are important people to you, you love them, you care about them, but those values are theirs and they don't have to be yours. But that sounds easier than it is, because that means that you have to have a conscious consideration of what you actually value. And that is quite difficult to unpick, because those are all quite unconscious things that you've picked up and you don't really know where they come from some of the time.
Yeah, huge. I think, again, this is why I kind of stumbled on the concept of the warrior code for my guys. And as much as it is seen, I think we've talked about the concept of woo-woo and content in men who are ready to embrace the belief systems, the spirituality side that I believe everyone has. It's just a case of whether you're ready to accept it or you're not, is being able to tune into that gut instinct, being able to tune into what your warrior code is, your driving force is, what I call, being able to do that to articulate a compelling North Star vision of goal for your life. Because I'm not a life coach, but I think unless you're having the deeper conversations, like the guys that I coach are over 30, they run businesses, they're in high-powered jobs, busy execs, whatever. If you are still at the stage, in my opinion, where you're 30 and you're still struggling to, and this isn't a judgment thing, optimize and maintain your health, it's because you haven't tied the value to how that can impact and influence your life long term. So my goal isn't to be a life coach, but it's to bring more awareness around, okay, if you want me to help you get in shape, looking at you through the personal physique and professional lenses, we're going to have to do some work around that. And being able to communicate your value in your personal life, and a prime example of this, of what holds men back, is not having the confidence or the skill set to be able to communicate their goals to their partner, which again is what I think I keep using the term, the language the kids use these days is simpy behavior. Like, are you a simp? Are you not setting boundaries with your partner? And I say this to guys all the time who are wanting to come into the program, who have ultimately the limiting belief, objection and excuse of, I need to speak to my partner. I'm like, mate, I'm not like doing this to polarize and challenge your masculinity, but you a fucking grown man that earns your own money. Why do you need to ask for permission to spend your own money on yourself? And in 99% of the time, it's not because they actually feel like they need to ask for permission. It's because they don't trust themselves to actually commit to the process and get an excuse. So it's easy to offload that responsibility to saying, my partner said she doesn't want me to commit. And it's like, I go back to this all the time with men of, if you don't understand and have that compelling North Star vision of your core values and driving forces, you're not going to be able to communicate that you are a high value man to other people, because it's going to be coming from an unauthentic place. So I think, I know I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there with like psychology and...
No, I'm with you. I get what you're saying. I actually, to a degree, I disagree to an extent. I think having a conversation with your partner is a respectful move, particularly if you have a joint bank account or there's a decision to be made together. However, the interesting thing about this is that conversation with the partner hasn't already happened.
That's, yeah. So
That's
I mean,
on my for me, right?
On a pre-call, sorry, I should have reframed this better of how before they even get to the call, one of the questions I've asked them is, does your partner know you're coming on this call and do they support you in your current goals? Because if they've not, if they've not ticked yes to that, I will ask them before that. I'm like, this is going to be a commitment. It's going to require support. You're going to need to look at how you show up in your relationship, going out for social events, food, the food shop, all these things. So it's like, it's by the time they've got to the call, I know if they haven't had that conversation. I think something that links very similarly to that is it's almost like the same frame, but from a professional standpoint, because, like men who, the guys that I work with are like, I'm not disqualifying that they aren't busy. They are fucking busy. Like, they are busy. Can they manage their time better? 100%. Can they communicate and set boundaries? Probably a lot better. And I think what you said about learning to communicate that, and how, like, in my opinion, and you'll probably agree, like, not just high value men, high value people set boundaries and communicate what they want, right? So how can men communicate their value in a professional environment that positions them as more high value status, as more of an authority to basically, how to articulate this? How can men communicate better to get what they want in a professional setting? I think that's the question. What things can they do? Because I think you can draw from your psychology background on this and give the value there. It's like, how do men approach that conversation with other men? What do men respond to?
Definitely status, but it's more complex than that, right? This is one of those things that people trot out. Men respond to status, but it's a one dimension. Like, some men with plenty of status don't actually need it from others. They need it from people who are above them. So in terms of what you can do at work to be better value, number one, understand what you actually want. You can't ask for what you want until you know what you want. Second thing, work with a coach or a professional to understand why you want it and make sure that it is actually important to you. Otherwise, you'll end up climbing the wrong ladder, and then you'll get, 2 years into the process of trying to get a promotion, and you realise, I fucking hate this company, I don't want to work here anyway, I actually want to start my own business. The third thing is that if you are in a leadership hierarchy right now, the only person you need to make... So your status will come when other people grant you it. You can't just take it. This is like authority. You are given it. That means stop worrying about impressing the CEO of a faceless organisation that has literally no idea who you are. Instead, you confer status to your immediate team. Team, line manager, anything that's your responsibility, take it. Anything which is a success, deflect it. So that people who are in the world around you, you gas them up. It's as simple as that. If you are the person that everybody else feels like is talking about them in a positive way when they're not in the room, when opportunities do come along and they're in a position to put you forward for a promotion or an opportunity or a project or whatever, they'll do that. The biggest realization you can have is that your value as a man is in direct proportion to the value you bring to others.
It's almost like that modesty. It's like the vibe that I'm getting that you're saying to kind of project is that modesty. It's like you deflect success, but you give the value. It's be someone of value, but don't inflate your own ego in that sense.
Take responsibility. That's attractive. And where you can, shine the light on others. That's probably the simplest way I could put it.
That's like a leadership quality, right? It's like to praise and uplift, and like real men who are leaders do that. They inspire change and positive emotion in others, which is huge.
Yeah.
I think that'll be really valuable because I get so many guys who I work with and they're like in these high-powered corporate jobs, and they're very aware that they're on a hamster wheel for some, in some shape or form, but it's like, how do I progress to that next level? And a lot of the core frustrations that the guys that I work with, it's like, it feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. But I think it's about, okay, well, and this is something that I've used as kind of like a reframe mindset shift with some of the guys, is like, okay, you're looking at success the wrong way, and this comes back to the value side of things. It's like you need to reframe what success looks like for you in your current situation, not dangling the carrot of the false reality of where you're not yet, because that's negative reinforcement. It's going to be a constant comparison game of I'm not where I want to be yet, as opposed to looking inwards and around you of the value that you can currently deliver in your workplace, which usually leads to the end result of the promotion anyway. So it's like helping men understand that mindset shift of like, where are they actually delivering value and where are they not delivering value, doing it in a way that gives them fulfillment as well. Does that make sense?
1,000,000%. And one of the most important things to remember is that people who are ambitious like us, people who are always forward looking, next thing, I want more, like I'm an ambitious person, I'm driven, right? People who identify with that mindset really struggle with this idea. These days that we're in today, right now, these are the good old days. We're in them. So when you have the promotion and you've started the company and you're in a different, more elevated position, this is the time now that you look back on and think, wow, that was great then. That was great. When I had no team and I was writing literally 18 hours a day on my kitchen table with my laptop that would overheat, and I had to, stick it on a tray so it didn't overheat for me. That I'm talking about my experience. Like that, those were the good old days. So now when I look back over the last, half a decade, it wasn't the sort of the milestone moments of huge revenue, like milestones. It was the grind, like.
The dragon story. It's like slaying the dragon, but the journey. Yeah.
Those are the stories I tell. It's not like, we just passed 1 million. Like that I don't tell those stories. I tell, I loved it so much I wrote on Christmas Day. That's the story you tell. So find some reverence for the work today. Don't spend all of your time glorifying the next milestone, because if you are a high achiever, you probably won't be able to really enjoy it and celebrate it anyway when you're in it. So try a little bit to recognize the good that you've got now, because there's benefits even if you're not quite where you want to be yet.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's really powerful, because again, it goes back to the thing we keep talking about, of that fulfillment and value in the now. And like, the reason a lot of people struggle with their fitness and their health goals is because they struggle to accept and appreciate where they're actually at now and the benefits, as opposed to now not where they are actually at. I think there's three kind of main actionable questions that I wanted to ask you today that have kind of come from just what we've talked about. Not one of them was kind of like preempted and planned, but it's kind of evolved a little bit. What the first one would be around, we talked about at the start, men not having that level of self-awareness or actually be able to tune into their values and like what they actually do. What advice could you give to the viewers and the men watching this who don't feel like they're in touch with their core values, or they feel very conflicted day to day? What advice could you give for them, or an exercise for them to be able to connect and do something that allows them to create that awareness around their core values?
That's a great question. I worked with a coach on mine. I feel like I got clear on my coach, got clear on my values by working with a coach. That's probably the fastest way of doing it, the most efficient way. If you're not in a position to make an investment in that right now, or this is something that you just are starting to explore by yourself, one exercise that I've seen work really well is to look at your calendar and look at your bank account, and that will tell you what you actually value, and where you spend your time and your money, rather than what you think your values are. I also think it's important to say at this point, if you've never done any values work at all, you may have an idea about what socially acceptable values are, and you may feel some resistance to what your values actually are. Like, for example, you might think family should be my number one value, but you spend all your time and money in your business. Mm-hmm. And you might think, I feel like a bit of a shithouse now that I've looked at the data, and I believe that family is a high value of mine, but actually I'm not spending time there. That's not necessarily accurate, so don't allow that to be a criticism, because what you possibly are seeing is that this is how you show value to your family. And I think that's what a coach can help with, is that sometimes you feel a little bit of resistance because you think, these are the things that should be my values. Am I living in a contradictory way? Not necessarily. And a coach can help you to see how the things that you're spending your time and money on actually are probably a facet of other deeper values.
It's huge. Huge, huge, huge. I just had like a little brainwave, like light bulb moment from something you said earlier tied to that as well, about the delegation side of things and stuff, that like when you're thinking about your values, like, because, you know, for those that are watching who run a business, they'll know that you will become the biggest bottleneck in your own business at some point for time or energy or whatever it is. And a huge thing that I work on with my guys is delegation, whether it's, you know, being able to hire, say an example, a client's complaining that their romance life is shit and that the stuff with the partner's shit. And like, cool, how much time are we actually dedicating, setting an intention around how many nights a week have you got date night, you know? Delegation in the form of hiring a nanny. A lot of these guys are successful business owners, but then they won't pay I don't know how much a nanny is because I don't have kids, but an hourly rate to, you know, to free up some time once a week. I'm like, the trade-off there is huge. But understanding, the point I was getting at was what you'd said about someone who tried to hire you, who was basically trying to like offload and delegate the responsibility. There's a fine line in delegation between, I think it's like, how I'm trying to explain this is tying the value and intention behind delegating of, okay, are you delegating it to avoid responsibility, or are you delegating it because it's just something that you don't value? And I think like being able to bring attention to that for you in terms of becoming a high performance person as for the viewers, understanding, like, if you can establish those clear values, it makes delegating a lot easier in your life, because you can really look at, okay, what are the things that I do that I don't value? What are the things that I should delegate but really need to take responsibility with? And I think the more awareness you can bring around that holistically across, like I said, the person, the physique, the profession, when when you understand those core driving values as a base, it becomes a lot easier to look at bottlenecks and where your limitations are down the line. I think that's huge. So the second question that I wanted to ask you, and we kind of covered it a little bit, was around, again, a lot of the guys that are watching this or will be watching this are in these corporate jobs or maybe business owners, and it doesn't really matter whether you are or not, because ultimately this concept that I want to talk about is life is sales, and your ability to sell yourself, and not sell yourself like that, but sell yourself in communicating your value and really gaining an understanding of, okay, what do high value men do in their communication and their ability to influence others with regards to sales? What are the kind of core characteristics of men who are really good at sales and influencing others?
That's a great question. I think this is absolutely pivotal in the sales process, and I think there's a few things. The first is, I think that there is a persuasive character, as in you are capable of building rapport quickly. I think character is part of it. I think clarity and confidence around exactly what you're selling and what you're not selling. That's really important. So, for example,
like
somebody sent me a message on Instagram sometime this week, and they were like, can I use this product for this service? So basically, can I repurpose this social media service that you do and use them as emails? And I was like, no, don't do that.
I think I've asked you that before.
Yeah. Like, it's not designed for that. They won't work properly for that. These have been optimized very successfully. They work really well on social media, but don't use them for emails, because that's not what they're designed for. So having clarity about what this product will do and total confidence that it will do that, and also enough confidence and certainty in yourself to say, that's not the intent of this product, I don't recommend you use it for that. Like, somebody came to me yesterday and they were like, I want you to take over my marketing. And I was like, cool, it costs this much. He's like, sweet, I can't afford that at all. I was like, okay, cool, well, I have this other service which is a fraction of the cost, and it could be that suits you better, but I'm not going to take any personal responsibility for that. I dip in once a day, it's a group thing. I'm not going to oversell you on that, because I don't want you to be distorted on what I'm going to give you. It's more important that you're clear on what you're not getting. And I think that sometimes people can be a little bit scared to say that. So we've got confidence, character, certainty, and I would say we need excitement. I think this is a really underrated part of any sales process. If you're not visibly, audibly excited about the quality of the product, you don't need to be selling it. You need to either understand it better, the impact that it will have on people's lives, you need to understand that better, or you need to make the product better. Because all of sales, all of persuasion is actually your enthusiasm for the thing that conveys any success at all. So you'll know this, you've known me for ages. Anytime I sell something new online, I'm like, oh my God, you guys have had an idea. Do you fancy this thing? And nothing's ever built. Literally nothing's ever built. We had a record month of a new product in Q4. It was literally, and I said on the story when I was telling it, yeah, it was tapas. I was like, listen, none of this is built. I think it's super cool. What do you guys think? Sold 70 spaces or something for it, that month. But not a single word of it was written. And having the rapport with my audience to say, I haven't done this yet, but if you want it, I'll make it. I think that's a powerful thing, because because I was enthusiastic about it, it made them enthusiastic about it. If your sales team or you doing your own sales or whoever is not amped to hell about how impactful this purchase is going to have on someone's life, that is a really important thing to address. And that's true if you find yourself lacking motivation to make a change in your own life as well. You're like, why am I not more excited about this? I think that's a really underrated part of the process. Your own excitement for the change, the transformation of the product, the sale, whatever. That's the driver whenever I sell stuff.
Yeah, huge. I think there's like I don't know what I've seen it on. It was like a reel or something about the concept you're talking about. Is the teaching at Harvard Business School of advertise a product first, but then build afterwards based on demand. Because otherwise, if you build a whole thing and nobody wants it, you've wasted X amount of time.
Yeah, and potentially loads of money. If you're building an actual product, you've wasted actual R&D on it. Whereas, we build digital products, so it's more of a waste of time. But the number of people who come to me for consulting, and I'm like, sell it. I'm like, but I haven't got anything to sell. I'm like, I know, that's the whole point. We don't want to waste any time like building stuff that people don't want. Let's test market to appetite first, and then you can build it. Or you don't, and we'll build something else.
Amazing. No, it makes so much sense. And I think for anyone that's building or tries, but this comes so much with personal branding as well, like trying to build something on a personal level is like creating that rapport and connection in the sales process, just regardless of anything, because there's always a sell, there's always something available. There's people always are looking to get closer to you if it's on a personal brand level. I guess it's like, how do you structure and just create something that can be unique in the sale as well, make them feel like it's specifically for them as well. I mean, and this isn't just me talking about the sales process of how I work with clients. It's like no two guys that I coach are the same, because when you're looking at things like functional blood chemistry analysis, everyone needs different things. Like I can run your blood work and I'm going to go, how much is it going to cost? And I'm like, cool, we can go through pricing of like working with me as a coach, but there are going to be expectations around, improving the quality of the food that you're eating, which is as a price attached. There is going to be maybe access to a gym membership. There is maybe going to be some supplements you're going to need to buy and things like that. And it's just about being able to communicate. And more importantly, I think in the sell, understanding what their unique wants and needs are to be able to then showcase your value in what you're doing, to be able to create that connection and add the value for them as the service. That's something I've always found with your copy and your content. I always know exactly, okay, it's very clear what you get and what you don't get. That's been a light bulb moment for me, is in my own, I guess you call it marketing and content, is being able to tell people what this isn't. I think is just as important as being able to say what this is. That's
who it's not for, right? It's the same extension. It's exclusionary marketing. One of the angles I used in one of my campaigns last year was, here's exactly how much money we left on the table because we wouldn't oversell people stuff that they didn't need. Mm-hmm. So like we lost, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was like, here's £200,000 that I could have been in my bank account right now, but isn't, because we operate with integrity. And actually put a monetary value on how much that costs. I think that can be a really powerful angle for, I don't know how aggressive I can be on this, but like, you can't buy us. Like, that's ultimately what all of your integrity, like if you're talking about being high value in any capacity, you can't buy us. You can't make me do something I don't want to do. You can't make me work with, and even if I had no fucking money in the world, you still can't make me do it. I think ultimately that is...
Sorry to interject. That also creates more desire for someone as well, because they think it's natural to want what you can't have. So from a marketing concept, that makes people, I guess, want you more.
100%. And if we've ever had clients sort of sneak through the net somehow and we've thought, I don't know if we're completely aligned here, you're asking us to say things that we don't, you don't actually like do these services. So I'm like, no, you're out. And I will lose clients and lose revenue rather than compromise on that, because as far as I'm concerned, we work in service to the prospect through the coach, and I think like that's quite a different thing that we do as an agency or as a company or whatever. Agency always sounds so anonymous. It literally is just me and my sister and it's a very small team here. So from my perspective, it comes down to the point of making money isn't that you can buy anything you want. The point of making money is that nobody can buy you. And if you're
freedom.
If you're up for sale to the highest bidder, what what are your values then? Where's your line? Where's your personal integrity? Where's that line? So that's a big one for me. And I would imagine probably lots of your listeners will probably feel the same. I know it's a big one for you too. But when you sit and actually look at your values and build a business around them, all of the marketing, North Star, all the mission, all of that stuff writes itself because it's just an extension of you.
Amazing. Okay, so just to recap, I do have one more question for you that's kind of pushing for you as well. It'll give some value for you to be able to communicate that to the audience. But just to recap for the viewers, what we've kind of summarized is your language is really important and it dictates your value and ability to persuade and progress, whether that's on a personal, physical, professional level. If you can't clearly understand and don't have the awareness to communicate your value to others, your success is going to be limited. I think that was a huge kind of light bulb and takeaway for me. And the way you talk about your fitness, your goals, will ultimately dictate the direction in which you're heading. So being able to articulate that North Star vision shapes your ability to follow through, because it's almost the roadmap tying into the values, starting out with the values, the awareness, and being able to write that down and communicate kind of dictates your path. So I think that, the stuff you've talked about, Cath, has been fucking incredible. So thank you. My last question for you is always, I like to let the guest plug their shit and just kind of give a bit of an insight. So where can listeners learn more about improving their messaging and self-talk with you? What's the go-to call to action for people?
If you want to just read what we're all about and take your time and digest it all, you can come to the website, which is kindcopy.co.uk. If you would like to have a conversation with me, you can find me on Instagram. It really is me in my DMs. There's no VA in there or anything. It is kindcopyuk. Say hi. I'll be nice. Let me know what you thought. Let me know your big takeaways. And that's not a sales pitch. Like, I spend a huge amount of time in my DMs actually just talking to people, because one of our core values as a company is that you should talk to people even when you're not trying to sell them stuff. So if you would like to talk to me, I'd love to talk to you.
I think that's huge. Thank you so much for your time, Cath. I loved it.
Thanks for having me on, pal. This was lush.